Did you know that royal houses are famous not only for their unlimited power and wealth, but also for incest? And the desire to keep their lineage pure from foreign blood has led to the degeneration of entire dynasties. Watch the video until the end, and you will learn when incest became the primary way to maintain power, and how its consequences ruined the life of Charles II, who became the last monarch of the Habsburg dynasty. Are you all set? Then let us indeed proceed on this exciting journey. Major world religions oppose incest. The Bible contains clear prohibitions against relationships between close relatives. The Jewish Torah speaks about the dangers of incestuous unions, as they threaten a departure from a decent and moral life. The warning from the Muslim prophet Muhammad also pertains to marriages between relatives, as future offspring are unlikely to be healthy. Geneticists identify 3 levels of close kinship. The first includes biological siblings, fraternal twins, parents, and children. Such relationships are considered incest. The risk of having a sick child as a result of such relationships exceeds 60%. The second level includes uncles and aunts, nephews, grandparents, as well as half-siblings who share one common parent. The risks of pathologies and offspring are 25%. The third level includes cousins, step-uncles, and step-nephews. The probability of pathological inheritance is low, around 5%, but only if there have been no consanguineous relationships or hereditary genetic diseases in the family before. Scientists suggest that it was consanguineous marriages that led to the extinction of Neanderthals due to the accumulation of genetic problems. With the formation of states, there arose a need to maintain blood purity among royal figures. Heirs to the throne were allowed to marry only partners of equal lineage. As a result, marriages between close relatives were common in most ruling dynasties, leading to the birth of children with hereditary diseases and genetic disorders. The pharaohs of Egypt considered themselves chosen by the gods, and to preserve the sacred blood, they married close relatives. The most famous example is Pharaoh Tutankhamun, the son of Akhenaten and his biological sister. Initially, Akhenaten was married to Nefertiti, who bore him 6 daughters. To have a male heir, he married his sister. In this union, Tutankhamun was born, inheriting severe genetic diseases. It is important to note that Tutankhamun's ancestors were also mostly children of close relatives. The accumulation of genetic mutations occurred gradually. Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun, who was his half-sister, the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, left no heirs. Their children were born stillborn. Tutankhamun was only 19 years old when he passed away. Thanks to modern methods, we can imagine what this pharaoh looked like. He had pronounced clubfoot, with his left foot turned inward, and he walked with a cane. Many canes were found in the tomb along with the pharaoh's mummy. After Tutankhamun's death, Egypt was ruled for a time by military leaders, and then Ramses I, the founder of the 19th dynasty, came to power. Thus, Tutankhamun became the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. In history, incest was most commonly found in the marriages of representatives of the monarchic dynasties of Europe. The most powerful of them was the Habsburg dynasty, which once owned vast territories, from the tropical forests of Central America to the jewel of Europe, Vienna. The Habsburgs started as a small and little-known family, but they were smart and resourceful in political matters. Understanding that a small family couldn't gain power through war, they bet on diplomacy and advantageous marriages. By the mid-15th century, the Habsburgs controlled almost all of Central Europe, but their ambitions didn't stop there. They decided to gain power over Spain. Philip the Handsome married the Spanish Princess Juana, who was madly in love with her husband. It seemed that everything was going well, but the problem was that Juana was born as a result of an incestuous marriage, and this negatively affected her mental health. Despite this, the Habsburgs managed to secure their position on the Spanish throne, but Juana's genes, known as the MAD, would still make their presence felt. Her mental state was extremely unstable. Juana couldn't come to terms with her husband's death and traveled the country with his body, telling him about the beautiful Spain. Charles, the son of Philip and Juana, became the most powerful man of his time and sought to maintain that status for future generations. He decided that to achieve this, all power should remain within the dynasty, not allowing anyone from outside to claim it. How to do this? By marrying only relatives. Thus began the Habsburgs' love story with consanguineous marriages. Due to this tendency to enter into familial marriages, their famous Habsburg jaw emerged, which is often depicted in royal portraits. Although it was long believed that the cause of the skull-bone deformities could be consanguineous marriages, it was only in 2019 that this became a scientifically confirmed fact. Researchers calculated the inbreeding coefficient in the family, which reflects the likelihood of receiving two identical genes due to parental relatedness. It was measured that the average Habsburg has an inbreeding coefficient of 0.093, meaning that about 9% of their maternal and paternal genes were identical. Charles II, the last ruler of Spain from the Habsburg dynasty, was born in 1661 in the country's capital, Madrid. He was born from the marriage of King Philip IV and his second wife, Mariana of Austria, who was her husband's niece. The House of Habsburg practiced marital unions between close relatives for centuries, which negatively affected the health of their heirs. As a result, Charles II was born with serious physical and mental disabilities. From the very first days of his life, signs of disability were evident in Charles II. It took him 4 years to learn to speak, and he only started walking at the age of 8. He had a deformed jaw, which made speaking and eating difficult. Insufficient attention to the child's upbringing also played a role. Until the age of 6, he was considered practically an infant, and more attention was given to court etiquette than to education. Charles II's health condition raised concerns, and many doubted that he would be able to live a long life. The Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Leopold I, brother of Mariana and husband of Philip IV's daughter Margaret Teresa, along with French King Louis XIV, husband of another daughter of Philip IV, Maria Teresa, had already begun to consider the division of the Spanish inheritance. After his father's death in 1665, Charles II ascended to the throne, but his mother, Mariana of Austria, became his regent. By law, her powers were supposed to end when Charles turned 14. However, she continued to govern the country, citing her son's poor health. Only in 1679 did Charles become the full King of Spain. In 1909, Charles became the full King of Spain. The reign of Charles II lasted 35 years, but during that time the country fell into decline. By the time of his death in 1700, Spain was in a state of deep crisis and had lost its status as a great power. After the king's death, a struggle for the Spanish inheritance began, leading to a protracted war. Due to numerous inbreeding marriages in the dynasty, the appearance of King Charles II changed significantly. His characteristic Habsburg chin took on an exaggerated form, and the elongated lower jaw and tongue hindered the king from chewing food and speaking normally. At a height of 192 centimeters, the king also had a very large head. He started walking and talking late, partly because he was a long-awaited heir. His brothers and sisters died young. Charles became king at the age of 4. His mother was the regent for him. In 1675, the king was recognized as of legal age. But it was obvious to everyone that he was incapable of ruling the country. Charles was sickly and weak, suffering from bone softening, syphilis, and fever. Until the age of 4, he needed a wet nurse's milk and could barely walk without the help of a governess. He likely had epileptic seizures. The king's character also left much to be desired. He was capricious, gloomy, distrustful, and secretive. His mood often changed, with baseless anxieties giving way to bouts of melancholy. Charles II loved to eat, which bordered on gluttony. His indiscriminate eating led to digestive issues and chronic bouts of fever. And while his peers were in the prime of their lives at 40, Charles had turned into a limping, bald, toothless, and half-blind old man. There is a version that, not knowing how else to help the monarch recover from his ailments and conceive an heir, his close associates turned to a famous astrologer of the time, who advised the king to try corpse therapy. Admit it, that sounds at least strange, but back then, in an era of poor medicine and lack of technical capabilities, people believed in the supernatural. The king ordered the relics of saints and some of his relatives to be brought to him. The miracle, of course, did not happen. The Spanish King Charles II passed away on November 1, 1700, and his death marked the end of the Austrian imperial house in Spain. The king was only 38 years old, but he looked every bit of 80. The court physician who performed the autopsy was shocked to find that there wasn't a drop of blood inside the king's body. His enormous head was filled with water due to hydrocephalus, and the heart, according to the doctor, was the size of a peppercorn. The lungs were corroded, and the intestines were in a state of decay and gangrene. The doctor also noted that the king had only one coal-black testicle. For the Spaniards, there was no doubt the king was bewitched. No one even considered that incest could be the cause of his condition. In 19th century Europe, choosing a suitable bride among royal families was a complicated task. Each monarch sought to create a strong alliance that would strengthen their position and benefit the country. However, there weren't that many royal houses, while there were plenty of candidates for marriage alliances. Incest came to the forefront again. Queen Victoria of England, known as the grandmother of Europe, and King Christian of Denmark, known as the father-in-law of Europe, became the most prolific monarchs of their time. Their marriage strategies led to the creation of a complex network of familial ties among European royal houses. Queen Victoria and King Christian of Denmark sought to connect their families with all possible ruling houses in Europe. They were third cousins, and their descendants continued to marry each other, increasingly sinking into the depths of incest, albeit not the closest kind. Some descendants of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who were second cousins to each other, suffered from hemophilia. Due to complications caused by this disease, one of the royal couple's children and 2 or 3 of their grandchildren died. There is suspicion that porphyria, which King George III suffered from, was also passed down to his descendants through Victoria. In particular, it could have passed to the German House of Hohenzollerns. Besides their relation to Victoria, they were already descendants of George I. When Kaiser Wilhelm II's temperamental behavior intensified in the early 20th century, one of the courtiers accurately diagnosed him with George III's threshold. One of the most tangled webs of inbreeding was the union of Nicholas II and his second cousin. This marriage raised concerns among some members of society, but it was made to strengthen ties between Russia and other European countries. During this period, Germany was not yet unified. It was home to many kingdoms, duchies, and counties. German dynasties actively sent their daughters to marry representatives of other European monarchies. This was beneficial for both sides, as an alliance with a royal family was considered prestigious. Thus, the German dynasties gradually conquered Europe. Their representatives became kings of Denmark, Greece, Bulgaria, Norway, Belgium, and even the United Kingdom. The ruling Windsor dynasty, for example, has German roots. At the beginning of the 20th century, the thrones of Europe were occupied by members of royal families who were closely related. Russian Emperor Nicholas II, King George V of Great Britain, and Kaiser Wilhelm II were cousins to each other. The relationships between the monarchs were tense, leading to conflicts and grievances that became the cause of one of the most destructive wars in history, World War I. Russian Emperor Nicholas II married Alexandra Fyodorovna, his third cousin. She was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. Their children faced the consequences of this consanguineous marriage. The only son of the last Russian Tsar, Tsarevich Alexei, suffered from a severe illness due to his parents' consanguineous marriage. The child had to be carried around until he was about 7 years old. His uncle constantly accompanied the boy and tried to protect him from any injuries. But even that couldn't prevent the numerous bleeding episodes in his joints. Perhaps if Nicholas had chosen a different wife, the fate of the Russian Empire would have turned out differently. In those times, marriages between close relatives were quite common, and the participants often had no idea about the potential negative consequences for their descendants. Probably, except for the case of Queen Victoria, who wrote in her diary that Prince Albert was quite charming and extremely handsome at their first meeting. Most consanguineous marriages were not based on love or desire, but aimed at preserving power and prestige within the family for as long as possible, as well as producing as many heirs as possible. Marriages within royal families have been and continue to be a common occurrence. On one hand, they helped strengthen power and influence, while on the other hand, they increased the risk of passing hereditary diseases to descendants. And I, friends, want to make you an interesting offer. You have a unique opportunity to become part of our team. If you have skills in video editing, can voice videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we would be happy to work with you. Message our Telegram bot, link in the description. That's all for today. Bye everyone.